I found that I've learned everything I know about running a business through actually doing it, and it never crossed my mind to run a business until I was about 22. And all through school, the careers advice I got, no careers advisor ever mentioned to me the fact that I could run my own business. So I was wondering what opportunities there are for young people in school to experience a real life business situation where they're running an enterprise.
I think it's really important that we make learning about business, the world of work, careers, a standard part of the curriculum, part of secondary school for every young person. And it's really important in school that you're doing, maths and English and science and doing sport. But I think it's also important that young people have a chance to experience careers and to think to themselves at quite an early stage, what would I like to do? Where would my ambitions take me? And then to get an experience of what that's actually like. And that's partly about allowing you to make up your mind about what kind of career you might want to go to. But it's also, I think, about opening up people's minds to things which they might not have thought was for them. So, as you said, you found out later in life that your career path is going to be as an entrepreneur running your own business. But I think it's good for young people when they're in secondary school, 13, 14, 15, to learn about what it's like to run a business, what it means in practice, and to spark off for those young people for whom it's going to turn out to be for them. And whether that's running a business or being a doctor or an engineer, even being an actor on the stage, the important thing is we excite people's imagination and actually persuade them that those kind of careers aren't for people who are different from them, actually that they can do it as well.
Hi Ed, I've recently started a master's course where I've been introduced to a very exciting, challenging way of learning, which is problem-based group work. And I've also found through my charity work that teamwork and collaboration is very important. Do you believe that the children today have got enough opportunity to try and solve problems out in teams?
Well, I think the truthful answer is yes, sometimes, but not enough. I remember talking to a leading business guy whose company advertises for jobs, and him saying that when you talk to employers about what kind of things they wanted from an 18-year-old going into work, the employers all say, we want young people who are ambitious, who can communicate verbally, who can work in a team, who can understand about risks and how to make difficult decisions. And too often, I think, in our schools, we teach people the opposite of that you do exams in writing, you do things on your own, you don't think about risk, you think about the safe thing. And the whole point of enterprise education and all the different things which we're trying to do around team games and project work is to get people to work together, to experience a bit of what the real world's like in terms of work. Because a lot of careers, whether it's public or private sector, are about, as you said, getting on with other people, working together, being part of a team, maybe leading a team. We need to get more of that into our school curriculum. And there's some really interesting ways in which it can be done. In Wakefield, we had this thing a couple of years ago where a lot of the secondary schools entered a team who were a team of 5 people who had to sell the idea of Wakefield as the rhubarb capital of Europe. Come to Wakefield because we grow the rhubarb here, make it a tourist attraction, a website, a competition. And those guys, they worked in a team and they had to make a presentation and they had to make a verbal presentation. They all had a business mentor. The thing which was interesting was that I think for a lot of those young people, things that they didn't do in school but liked doing, like being on the internet or working out a problem, they actually found is what you do in careers in normal life. And we need to get more of that into our education and make people see that's what careers are like, but also to develop some of those skills around teamwork especially.
Hi Ed, I welcomed the announcement in the budget this year of the 30% target for small businesses' access to public sector contracts. It's an area that my business has struggled to get into, and I wondered what the government is doing to help facilitate small businesses and startups selling to the public sector.
Well, your company is a really interesting company because it's both global, because I think you're kind of selling around the world here, from here in Wakefield, but also you're taking the fact that globalisation means we need to translate things into so many different languages, and you've got expertise which you're doing here and selling that around the world. So that's really exciting, and I hope the business keeps doing well and keeps growing. The reality is that the public sector sometimes does find it difficult because if you're going through, as you have to with public money, all the proper rules about procurement to make sure not just there's value for money, but things are done properly, sometimes that can be a bit cumbersome for small businesses. Whereas if you're a private sector or a person doing it with your own money, you can sort of take a risk and cut some corners. We can't cut corners. We need to use public money well. But I do agree with you that at the same time, we ought to make it much easier for the small business sector to work with public sector organisations. And that's something which we've been really focused on with the small business service. It's something I know John Hutton is really kind of keen to take forward on the business side. To try and get some of the bureaucracy out of the way so that we can make it easier for you to on the kind of smaller scale contracts anyway, to make it much simpler. So hopefully we can do more of that.
My business is a social enterprise, and one of the aims of it is to become a social firm, which is a company that employs at least 25% people with disabilities. I run some workshops for people with learning disabilities, and I'd really like to employ some of those people. But in general, they are going to need a lot of support in work, and they may be less productive than people who don't have learning disabilities. So what support could I as an employer get from the government in order to employ these people with disabilities?
Well, if you take the work being done by the Regional Development Agency and our small business service here in Yorkshire, they have an explicit objective within their overall support for small businesses to both support small businesses which are being started up by people with disabilities, but also to promote people with disabilities or with a learning difficulty to get into employment with targeted money that they can use for that. If you take Train to Gain, which is our way of providing for firms support for training for their staff, there is specific and extra money, again, for the extra training costs which will happen if you take on somebody with a disability. I think the employers who do it often find that it has a really powerful, positive impact upon the firm, as well as the people who are getting the jobs. And I think if you have the will to, you can get around the bureaucracy and find the financial support. But our challenge is, I think if you look, I mean, this is something which is taken forward by the Employment Department, Work and Pensions. I think if we look, we'd find there's quite a lot of sources of financial support. But actually it's making it easy for people to find where the money is and to take the risk, if you like, take the plunge. Yeah. So I hope you do it.
And finally, Ed, for young small businesses, the cost and consequently the risk of employing new members of staff is significantly greater for young and small businesses than it is for large organisations. I just wondered what the government can do to assist small companies when new employees don't quite work out.
Well, the way in which we have structured our tax system, but our system of employee rights, is to try and make sure we get the right balance between, on the one hand, making sure people are properly protected at work, but at the same time making sure you have flexibility. And I think one of the lessons you learn is if you want to give people protection, but also long-term employment, if you start giving them all the rights on day one, then it just makes it impossible for people to hire. So therefore, having a period of time where there's probation, or where you can both the employer and the employee get a time to work out if it's going to work out, that seems to be a much better way to do things. And across all of the way in which we've looked at labour market regulation, including the minimum wage, we've tried to be as sensitive as we can to the needs of small businesses in particular, while at the same time making sure that you don't end up with lots of employees who get a really raw deal. So there's a balance to be struck, yeah. And which is about flexibility and fairness at the same time. Mm-hmm. And we've got more people in work than we've ever had, yeah. And more jobs being created, and with the large majority of those jobs being created in the small business sector. So the evidence is, I think, over 10, 15 years, we haven't been getting it too bad, but we can always try and do it better, especially actually around training, where I think for a small employer, the costs, but also the complexity of providing in-work training for employees can be tough, unless that's I think an area where we could really focus. The thing I think is that if you look at my constituency in Ossett, in Normanton, right across, there are we've got more young people than ever getting good GCSEs, but we still have far more young people leaving school at 16 in the Wakefield district than in other parts of the country. It's generally a Yorkshire issue. The same would be true in Rotherham. The same would be true in Hull. In places where there was a sort of, there was a really powerful manufacturing industrial heritage, one of the consequences of economic change is that we haven't always been quick enough as communities to see you've got to invest in the next generation of young people with different skills. Yeah. And I think one of the really important things, I think that's why Wakefield was chosen to do this, is we've got to, to raise our levels of ambition, not just for some young people, but for all young people, and persuade people that, everybody who goes on to be an engineer or to run a business like you guys are doing, or to be a chief executive or to be a politician, that once upon a time they were aged 12 or 13 in school thinking, I wonder what I'll do with my life, and I wonder whether it could be for me. And what we've got to do is persuade more young people in our district that it can be them. And the great advantage of you guys being involved in this kind of programme is that, unlike me, who wasn't at school for 20 years and has never run a business the way you have, you can go in and say, 5 years ago I was at school, 10 years ago I was at school, this is now what we're doing, it could be you. And I think that kind of direct message from you to young people can be really powerful. So the statistics say, this is probably true for some of you as well, that the most successful entrepreneurs in our society didn't always get it right first time round. And you've got to have more than one go or second, and some that you fail and you start again. And then you find the thing which really gets there. But if the attitude is, if it's a hard work, it doesn't work out, I shouldn't have bothered, then you're never going to make it. And it's that sort of, that sense that, that people have, as you say, hard work, ambition, but an ability to pick yourself up and have another go. Those are the kind of things which we need to be getting into all young people in our district, I think.
Thanks very much, Ed, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. It's really helped.